As you may know, for internal affairs. But for external affairs, I unfortunately am of the opinion that what is being done needs to be done well and thoroughly. And so I would hate to have someone who was brave enough to at least start it, even though we don't agree with them on other areas. Supreme Court justices and other kinds of things interrupted in the middle, because that would be much, much worse. So I am in a good mood that surprisingly this election produced a result that I'm sure many of you don't approve of. But being a Middle East expert, unfortunately I have to assent. Now I have no guarantee that he's going to carry through, since he hasn't carried through very well up till now. But it would be a shame not to establish a democracy in the middle of the Mesopotamian heartland if he is able to do it.
Do you think it's possible?
I don't get into a big political thing at the moment because it would take the rest of our class. Why I'm in a good mood. That's all. Yeah, do I think it's possible? I could do it. But they didn't ask me to do it, and so they got Bremer in there. And I thought that with Bremer in there, I thought he was going to lose Bush the election, because Bush is a strange character. He can't speak, he can't put three words together particularly. But he's loyal, obviously. He never fires anybody, and he lets the man on. He's a corporation, Harvard-trained business school person who believes in being a CEO and letting the different people do their thing. And even if he's ill-served or not being served well, he seems to stick by these people. I don't think maybe he's aware that they're doing anything particularly not up to snuff, but whatever it is, Bremer totally mishandled the thing. You can't send someone like Bremer out in the Middle East wearing a blue blazer and bow ties and things like that. You need someone like General Schwarzkopf or someone there in the middle of that. It's impossible to do it the way they were doing it. But I think they've learned their lesson. Maybe we'll see. No, you can't build a democracy in the Middle East overnight. Now everyone in the Middle East is talking about democracy, whether they like talking about it or not. So you need to do something to change the what do you call it, the momentum of things there, because otherwise it's never going to end the kind of thing we're experiencing. I don't know if you guys all saw what happened to Theo van Gogh's great grandson in Holland the other day. He'd done a movie in Holland. His name was Theo. It's Vincent van Gogh's brother's great-grandson. And he'd done a movie on the position of women in the Islamic world that was critical. And he'd gotten threats, something like, who's the guy that wrote, who they were novelists that they were protecting, Salman Rushdie, threats like that. And he was walking to his studio in the morning in Amsterdam the other day, and a fellow rode up on a bicycle with a jalaba, shot him twice, and that didn't kill him, and the poor guy was running away. This is what really upsets me, that the guy got up off the bike, ran after him, and then stabbed him to death and cut his throat, and stuck his knife into him and put a big, some statement or something on his body with his knife in it. I think the momentum has to change in the Middle East. And they can't do it themselves because, again, they're under authority, and they need help to come into the modern world. Otherwise, we're all going to go back into the medieval world. And so it's a very difficult situation. So, I think Bush was trying to do something, and he didn't do a very good job. But I would hate to see someone risk his whole presidency on that, just thrown out of office unceremoniously. Seems to me people who try to do noble things should be at least complimented for that. I'm not speaking about his internal affairs and all the evangelical right wing or wherever other people are supporting him. I'm just speaking about the Middle East. So I'm not saying you should believe what I believe, but I'm just telling you why I believe. I'm probably one of the only faculty members on this campus who but then again, I'm a Middle East person, so I've lived in the Middle East, and so I was just joking about they never asked me. But if you know the Middle East, you would know how to have dealt with that. They just totally mishandled everything. They're Americans. They don't understand Islam. They don't understand the Middle East. They don't understand a lot of things. So they're learning. We're all learning the hard way. Okay, to come back to the Dead Sea Scrolls, I just want to share my fact that I'm actually, I haven't been as happy as this in a long time. I'm sorry to disappoint you guys. It's not because of Bush, it's because of the Middle East. I see hope gleaming for the future of the Middle East. Maybe I'll be disappointed, but there's no hope otherwise. So, as far as the situation with DeVoe and other people are concerned, Millick and so on, and this team, here, let's review what happened. Because it's important to know what occurred. So, the scrolls were found in 1947. Now, we don't know if they were found before then. There's some indication that they may have been found earlier than that. That the person who supposedly, as the mythology went, the little Bedouin boy or whatever, shepherd, always stereotypes are very favorite, familiar things in these stories. It turned out not to be a little boy or, or someone like that at all. He was a grown man, and he was a known treasure hunter, and he was always looking for things. As the story goes, he and another friend of his were tending flocks out in that area. And they were looking for lost sheep, as it turned out. But on the other side of it, maybe they weren't. He may have just been, in his spare time, looking for things in caves and things. But as the story goes, in the most famous presentation of it by the Israeli scholar Yigal Yadin, who actually was one of the people who was an actor in this drama, because his father's name was E.E. Sukenik, and he was the professor of classical studies or archaeology at the Hebrew University, his father. And just like Cal State Long Beach, his son succeeded him in the chair. No, at Cal State Long Beach, if my son succeeded me in my chair, it would be considered nepotism. But in the Middle East, anything goes. So it doesn't surprise people that the sons of people then take the father's chair or something like that. But Yigal Yadin had changed his name, because if you're going to be in the Israeli service of any kind, civil or government service, you're supposed to have taken a Hebrew name. So he took the name Yadin. And he was in the Israeli Defense Forces for a while. And he rose to be a general at the time of the war against the Arabs, the son, that is. Meanwhile, the father was the first Israeli scholar who saw these things. But Yigal Yadin told the story in this book, I forget the name of it, it's a Message of the Scrolls or something like that. And he's the one who promoted the story of the shepherd boy throwing a rock in a cave after lost sheep, and instead of hearing clatter, 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 he heard kaplunk, 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 and the sound of broken pottery. Almost every book tells this story. So when he climbed in there, he saw broken sherds of pottery and some jars actually not broken. So actually, the jars, if you've ever seen them when they have their lids on them, look like that, sort of. Something like that. And in there would be rolls of manuscripts, like sort of like 3 or 4 in a jar or something like that. Parchment manuscripts, but of course the ones he saw were broken, because the jars had been broken. They were scattered around on the floor of this cave, broken materials. At least this is the story. Now, there's some evidence that the Bedouins had found this before, and this is just a cover story. I don't know what's true or what isn't true on the issue of how or when they were found. But if you've ever been to Israel and Jerusalem, this top thing you will recognize. How many have been to Jerusalem? Well, this is called, they built a building in Jerusalem called the Museum or Shrine of the Book, and it's in the shape of this. It looks like the top of an acorn, actually. When I first went to Jerusalem, I didn't even know what that was supposed to be until I studied this a bit and realized it was supposed to be the lid of a scroll jar of the building. The museum that they have the scrolls housed in, the ones they found early on, not the ones that we had to publish later on and break them up. That's a long story, but that museum, the Shrine of the Book, near the Parliament building for the Israelis. Funny, if they really knew what was in the scrolls, some of them do, but the average Israeli doesn't. I mean, they probably wouldn't enshrine them next to the Parliament building because, as I said, they're the total antithesis of Rabbinic Judaism as we know it. They're the opposite side of the coin. And Rabbinic Judaism is the officially, more or less, sponsored religion of the Jewish state. But minor thing like that doesn't matter. In the world of the blind, the one-eyed is king, as they say. But in any case, there was also a black sort of thing next to it like this. Like sort of black stone that they built like that. And you see this building near the Parliament building. I only realized later this black thing was supposed to be a representation of the Bible. Because Bibles are always black in hotel drawers, they have black covers. Now they have multicolored Bibles, but in those days the Bible was black. That's for the Shrine of the Book. This is the architect's imagination. I suppose it'll do comic book world of some kind. But, I'm supposed to know about architecture because you know that I have this brother who's a famous architect. His name is Peter Eisenman, in case you've never heard of him. He's doing the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin at the moment next to the new Reichstag building. I'm supposed to know something about architecture because it's supposed to be in my family. So I can laugh. I don't laugh at his stuff or I get my head handed to me. But if you've ever been to Columbus, you'll see one of his buildings. The convention center in the middle of Columbus dominates the whole city there. It's a really beautiful building. Yeah. And there's also another one at Ohio State University, a museum, the art museum there. It's got two buildings there, but the Columbus Convention Center, I think, is from what I've seen, the best thing that he's done, in my view. But you'll see it. He's doing the Phoenix Cardinals Stadium that they're building there, and the new football stadium that they're building there. And he's doing the Arkansas Razorback Stadium. So, you'll probably come in contact with him sometime. In any event, he's a successful part of my family. My mother always says to me, well, what happened to you, it's hard for me to explain, but anyway. So I like to sort of have fun about architecture. This colleague of his just passed away. I don't know if you saw the obituaries in the paper. The deconstructionist philosopher Jacques Derrida. They used to work together because Darren, my brother, was known for deconstructionist architecture. And that's what they're supposedly doing. So they used to write sort of admiring essays to each other back and forth. You can look up you can Google and find these things. Derrida and my brother are big buddies. I haven't heard much more about that since Derrida passed away. It seemed like a nice enough fellow because he used to come here to UC Irvine a lot, Derrida. Anyhow, to go back to the subject, that's what that's what the Museum of the Shrine of the Book is in Jerusalem. It's supposed to be a scroll jar. So these Bedouins got in this cave, and that's how scroll studies present this material, by the way these things were discovered and the order in which they were discovered. So this is 1947, and that's the first cave discovered. So they call that cave 1. And over the next 8 years, there were at least, well, there are lots of caves. We took at Cal State Long Beach expedition out there for 3 years running. We mapped the whole place from the top of the Dead Sea all the way down to Masada, and looked into all the caves. We went into about 480 some odd caves or so. So there's plenty of caves, but they number them according to if they were manuscript bearing. So there were supposedly 11 manuscript bearing caves in all over that 8-year period discovered. The mother lode was cave 4, the 4th manuscript bearing cave discovered. But the manuscripts in cave 4 were not as well preserved. And by the way, all this is in the Bajent Lee book. So you should have that book. I think it's good as a background book, certainly easier to understand than my books. Theirs is a good airport book called The Dead Sea. And they're the guys who wrote, as I told you, except they're the ones who wrote this book that you may or may not have heard of, but it's quite well known now, Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And they wrote that before this other book here. That's called Deception. And what happened, how I got involved with them is a faculty member at Cal State Long Beach, someone in the French department. I don't know, that Belgian guy whose name was Pierre Eisenman, who retired some time back, but you may have heard of him. He came to me one day, and he was always coming to me with ideas, and he was a very big Belgian nationalist. He said, "I've just read this great book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Have you read this book?" You know, I said, "No." He said, "You've got to read this book." This was way back in 1984 or so. And he said, it's really interesting. So I didn't want to insult him. I took the book and I thought it was really a bit hokey and, not bad, but, it was fun. It was stimulating to some extent. And by the way, the Da Vinci Code is almost purely taken from that book. In fact, in the Da Vinci Code, he mentions that book when the heroes are talking or they're having a conversation with a young woman in it or something. I haven't read that Da Vinci Code, I don't intend to. Same as I'm not going to go to see Mel Gibson's movie. I don't like spin-offs and third rate. Takeoffs on something. Apparently, he says to the young woman, I guess the scholar in it, whose name is Robert something, by the way. The scholar in it says to the woman, Bajent told me this, so that's how I know the guy's name is Robert something, I wouldn't know it otherwise. Says, recommends, says the best book on the subject is Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Bajent and Lee. Lincoln Bajent Lee is the third author, as a matter of fact. The original idea was his, Henry Lincoln was the one who originally had the idea. So one group rips off the next group. But in any event, as you may know, one of the characters in the novel, if you've read it, and it's a very famous, popular novel now, it's going to be made into a movie, is called Lee T-Bing. And T-Bing is just Bajent, an acronym for Bajent. He's actually used his name as one of the characters in the book, T-E-A-B-I-N-G, I think it is, which is, if you look at this, and then Lee is his first name. So, I mean, he actually basically, she ran out on me. She worries me because she's always breaking her leg or doing something or other like that, Then she skipped out when I had my back turned here. Life is tough all over, You're going to have to deal with her, unfortunately. She's a nice person, actually. Seems very, very personable. In any case, so he's actually used it there. So they're more known for this book here. This person came to me in the French course. You got to read this book. And I read it, and I said, well, I gave it back. He said, what do you think? I said, oh, that was interesting. I said, but actually, they're pretty smart guys because they had a chapter there on the Dead Sea Scrolls that was really good. And I said, that chapter they did on the scrolls was really good. And I said, if they had read my work, I think it would have blown their mind, you know. And I got a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to go to Jerusalem the next year, and I was sitting in the Albright Institute, the American schools. I was trying to apply these different schools there with my family. I get a phone call from England from some guy, and he started talking my ear off. And I often used to have people do that, call me and talk my ear off. I wasn't paying much attention, and then he said, maybe you know me. I'm one of the authors of the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And it was Bajan, and I said, oh my God, yeah, I know who you are. A colleague of mine in the French department gave me your book. And actually, I think I know why you're calling. He said, why? I said, well, when I read your book, I told this colleague of mine that your section on scrolls was pretty good. If you read my work, it would have blown your mind. He said, that's right. We read your work and it blew our minds. We want to come out. We want to come out and talk to you. And 2 days later, he was on my doorstep with his wife in Jerusalem and stayed for a week and never left. And that's how we got to be pretty good friends. So that's the genesis of this Dead Sea Scroll deception. It's because of a faculty member from this university that I even knew who they were. Anyway, they go into all this stuff pretty carefully, so you can get it. So you should get that book, I think, as a background book. It's the best one I know for background, so you might as well use that one. There are lots of different ones, but that's probably the easiest ones to get a hold of. Plus, they're very well-known writers now. So the first cave is where the first scrolls were found, 47, and they were, ultimately there was the big mother lode was cave 4. Now we led expeditions. Bajan came, and he's got some pictures from our expeditions in the Dead Sea Scroll deception. He was very helpful in our expeditions. He was a very active fellow, fun to be with, and really interesting. In fact, I was just down in Rennes-le-Chateau with him last summer because, in fact, really funny. The mayor of Rennes-le-Chateau called me up at 2 o'clock in the morning last night to congratulate me on the Bush's victory. He's an ex-French paratrooper, Colonel Legion d'Honneur, and for some reason he's taking a shine to us from Cal State Long Beach. I don't know why. And he woke me up at 2:30 in the morning because he just discovered, and he was like totally, Noel isn't here, but he really liked Noel's boyfriend, Ron. The fellow who comes to the class sometimes, a big tall guy, and who teaches in our department somewhat, a part-time teacher. And because of those two, they drink. I don't drink. And they love drinking with Ron. Love Ron. And, Ron can just drink endless amounts of whatever is available. These two just hit it off like two peas in a pod. So he loves having us from Long Beach there, and I don't want to be involved in it because it's every kind of Looney Tunes person, and it makes me look bad. But what happened was someone from Long Beach knew I knew Bajan, and he'd read the book, and he came from that village. And he was a racing car driver from this village in southern France, and he came to me about 10 years or 8 years ago in my office and said, my family were the ones who built the towers, you know the story, for the priest. And we have a tradition, we know in the family that he buried something under the corner of the tower. And so since he was from Long Beach, I felt I had to. Could you speak to Bajan about it? And Bajan wasn't interested. The guy kept bothering me and bothering me and bothering me and bothering me until finally I said I would try to maybe do an expedition under the auspices of the university if I could. And then, lo and behold, things got rolling, and then I ended up on the Bill Curtis. You saw that show recently on the History Channel. Was it the Holy Grail and the Templars? You would have seen me in it. I tried to hide. Ron's in it too. I tried to, disappear from it, but Bajan came out too. But I didn't want to get involved in all that stuff. But I got dragged into it. But it's an interesting story. I'll tell you some other time, perhaps. But also the next week he did the Dead Sea Scrolls because he came out on our Dead Sea Scroll expedition from the History Channel. And Bill Curtis interpreting history that he did, and he really crummy show he did. We gave him so much good footage, and he just messed it all up. Did the usual, mediocre presentation. I was really disappointed in it, but he had great footage, and he just did a tacky job totally. But that's on Interpreting History and the History Channel 2, called the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I'm a principal player in that one if you want to look at it. It's very poorly done, so I'm not very proud of it. But that has to do with Cal State sending expeditions out there under my auspices, and we did. We went out there 3 years, and we did look at all the caves. We mapped it all and so on. And we did the first radar ground scan of the Dead Sea Scroll Plateau. And what we were actually interested in was finding manuscripts that hadn't been discovered yet. And my idea was that there would be manuscripts that the Bedouin couldn't get to, cave-ins, landslides, things like that, or caves they wouldn't be able to locate. So that's what we did the ground scan for. And we did find something on the marl next to Cave 4. So what we did this past summer was to go out and try to get into those marls, because the lawsuit over the Dead Sea Scrolls kept me out of Israel for 10 years. And I couldn't go back and follow up that stuff that we had discovered back in 1989. It's all independently, but he's got pictures of it and so on of our expeditions out there. But I couldn't go back out, and I finally was able to go back out this past year, but we weren't able to get a good ground scan going, so we really couldn't locate the empty area that we found near Cave 4, which we wanted to, which we thought was the only real possibility of finding more manuscripts. That was before we broke the monopoly of the scrolls, because the idea we had was if they would show us the unpublished scrolls, let's find more scrolls. Because what we had at that time wasn't sufficient to come to grips with what this group was, we thought. But now it's differently. I think it basically was. Anyway, that's a long personal story. Let's go back to the actual history. So Cave 1 was the first one found. The reason I was talking about Cave 4 is that we were digging near Cave 4 in the Bill Curtis thing that you might see in the Dead Sea Scrolls thing he did for the History Channel this past winter. He just did one the other day. I saw a 2-hour one on Genghis Khan, but he's also done Billy the Kid and a lot of other things. So in this weird series, I'm in 2 of them with Billy the Kid and the Hole in the Wall gang. This guy, Bill Curtis, is nuts, but he's done about 450 of these things. He's got a town in Kansas that he owns, that he promotes, a western sort of cattle town that he sort of wants to make like that Branson, Missouri place. And he's got this ranch and so on. So he's, all the money he makes on this stuff, he funnels into this town in Kansas. Anyway, Cave 4 was not found until 1952 or so. And Cave 11 is the last cave found. And that was found around 1966. Well, what happened was, when these Bedouin treasure hunters or others found these materials, they brought them up to Bethlehem, which is the closest town up on the plain to the scrolls area. And I can draw you a little map here, in case you don't have it. I have maps in the back of the James book and so on, but in case you don't have a good... So here's the Dead Sea, right? And this is where Qumran would be. Jerusalem would be up here on the spine, and Bethlehem would be here. So Bethlehem is the closest area to where the scrolls are. So they would come up at Bethlehem. Hebron is here. Jericho would be here. And so on. I mean, this is not to scale or anything. There's a wadi here, a dried up riverbed that's had water some of the time. You know, the pictures in the Dead Sea Scrolls, these are all pictures I took personally. So I think we might have a picture of, water coming to this place. These are all my pictures. This is water channel. This is from our expedition when we're doing the ground scan on the cliffs. Let's see, here's some of the water across the way. James Tomb, John the Baptist's
execution place. I don't see any water coming down the wadi. That must be in the James book. It's in that book probably. Huh? I think it's in that one. Thanks. Yeah. Here's where the scroll, this is where the scrolls are found. This is me and my wife walking down this Queen Helen's burial place here. Here's that star, the Balaam of the star I told you about from the catacombs. And let's see. Some of the manuscripts that we have, let's see the previous ones. So, this is the water channel that they dug out with actual chisels out of the cave. Here's an actual waterfall. You can't see it. This is what I mean. The water only comes down in this area maybe a couple of times a year, if that. When there's a heavy rain up on the Bethlehem Plain, it runs down here like this. And this is where they dam it up. This is the hole that they would get the water through, and this is the other side of the channel. And then they would run the water down to the settlement. The settlement depends on the water. So this is actual water pool at Qumran with water in it from the rain. And I have, those are colored slides, but oh, here's Balaam and the star right here. That's a really good one for the catacombs. There's Balaam pointing at the star in the star prophecy. That's Christian catacomb in Rome. Maybe 2nd century AD or something. Anyway, the water would come down from the Bethlehem Plain, or in fact, you would walk up to the Bethlehem Plain. So the Bedouin brought the material up to the Bethlehem Plain here. Palestine is like this. These are kind of like a ridge. It doesn't extend this far. It goes down like that. Then there's a break here, which is called the Valley, which is where all the military campaigns always went. That's why they call this Armageddon here, because the town in the valley is called Megiddo. And the word Armageddon comes from the fact that all the armies would come through this valley. And then this is Galilee, Upper Galilee up here, which is hilly again, going on into Lebanon, and the Golan Heights over here. So this would be, this dropped precipitously from about 2,000 feet above sea level to about 1,000 feet below sea level or so. So it's a very, about a 20-mile drop. Otherwise, the area very much looks like Palm Springs down there by the Dead Sea and Jericho, except it's below sea level. It's like the Salton Sea in a way. It's that kind of depression, much deeper than the Salton Sea, obviously, but that's basically what the Dead Sea looks like. It's more spectacular than the Salton Sea, but the Salton Sea isn't a bad replica, though it's pretty artificial, the Salton Sea. But the reason for it being there is the same. I think that the water from the Rio Grande or whatever it was, the Baja came up that far at one point. And the same with the Red Sea. This got cut off from the Red Sea down here. So this is a rift here. So this Bedouin boys went up here to Jerusalem, Bethlehem, gave the scroll that they found to a merchant there, but it was well known by the name of Candid. Then he was a member of a Syrian Christian group of some kind. So he went to Jerusalem with the text to a Syriac priest of some kind in the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem with the manuscripts. And that fellow's name was Athanasius. His name was Bar Athanasius, which is the name for, I don't know if that's how you spell it, but something like that. And he claims that he had a vision. He's written a book about this. He claims he had a vision when he was young.
He was in sort of one of the escapees from the Turkish-Armenian massacres back in the 1915-20 period. And he got to Syria and Palestine after that. And he claims I guess he lost his family or whatever, went into a monastery, but he claims he had a vision that he was going to see manuscripts sometime. And so when this guy came with the manuscripts, he claims he knew and could read them and knew what they were. Whether or not he did or he couldn't, he wanted to buy some. So he made an appointment with these guys to come back the next week with what they found. He said he originally immediately recognized that they were valuable, authentic things. They came back the next week, but for some reason the gatekeeper or doorman outside the building or monastery wouldn't let them in. Whether something got mixed up or the signals got crossed. So they had these manuscripts. They didn't know what to do with them. They started peddling them on the street. So they went over to the Jewish side, because this was on the Arab side, and they went to the Hebrew University and found this Sukenik, Yadin's father, who immediately took some from them to inspect them. And then he realized that they were authentic. And he, I think, bought some from them. Meantime, Athanasius made another appointment with these fellows, and then he bought some more from them. These all came from Cave 1. Then they were taken to the American school where Cross and others were on the spot, and this guy from Claremont who did the Ancient Manuscript Center, who took the pictures that everyone knows about, the early picture called John Trevor. So anyone associated with these texts got to be famous or well-positioned afterwards. Cross, and Trevor and these people were at the Albright Institute called the Americans. At that time, all the countries who were doing business in the Ottoman Empire and afterwards in the Middle East had a school where who was responsible for their scholars and archaeologists and people who were working in the area. So there was a French school, there was a British school, there was an American school, there was a German school. These are all in Jerusalem still. Now, the French school the French were always the traditional defenders of the Vatican since Charlemagne's time, and in the Crusades as well. Became also the arm of Vatican archaeology too. It was a French Vatican dual school called the École Biblique, but it was run by French priests. And they had a task. They were tasked in the late 19th century by the church to make, because a lot of new discoveries were being made, and it was to some extent upsetting the parishioners or the flock. And their job was to make the results of modern archaeology comprehensible and palatable and acceptable, if you like, to the rank and file. So they had a theological warrant. That page to discuss it pretty well, I think. They explained how they got started and so on. So they were not just a player that had no agenda. They had an agenda. Their agenda was to put these things within the realm of church doctrine in an acceptable manner, the modern discoveries, that wouldn't upset or undermine or upset the rank and file. And that's what they did with the scrolls. Now, whether they did it on purpose or they really believed this or whatever, that's the big question. I think they really believed this because of the reasons I showed you in Miller's book. And they couldn't see these documents as I see them, and I may be wrong, but I think I'm close to the truth, as a quote Christian. But they're not Christian because they're not Christian, just like Millich says. They don't have an idea of the Christ. But my point is there was no Christ in Palestine at this time in the first century. That came through the letters of Paul later. And it's Paul that basically is promoting the Christ doctrine, if you want to call it that, the supernatural being who's called the Christ. Whether the original people in Palestine knew anything about a supernatural being called the Christ is something else. I have no idea. But in my view, you see, the Essenes are really what Christians were in Palestine before they went overseas and got Paulinized. So whether there was a figure that they saw as the Messiah, which is not the same as the Christ,
because the Jewish Messiah is not necessarily a supernatural being, or never was supposed to be, particularly. But as Paul amalgamated this material with Greek mystery religion, Hellenistic ideas of gods and expectations, and Roman religious presentations of the emperor, then the Messiah became a son of God equal to the emperor. But as you see in Palestine, you'll see there's no idea of a son of God as such. You become a son of God insofar as you're totally righteous. It's what would be called adoption as such. In other words, there are some of the early sectarian Christian groups, which are probably earlier than the Orthodox Christian groups, who understand that, when Jesus comes out of the baptismal waters in the sectarian Gospels, it's the text from one of the Psalms is quoted, which is altered in the Orthodox Gospels. When there's one of the Psalms says, "This is my something I forget. You are my son." No, that's in the Orthodox Gospel. And the other one is, "Oh, this is my only begotten son." Or, "At this moment I have begotten you." In other words, you're begotten is when at the moment you become perfectly righteous, you're cleansed and all that sort of thing. So you're not a son of God till you go through all this, is what the implication of those other Gospels are. It's an adoption as sonship now, but the others change it to, you're my only son, you see. So that becomes a more of a Hellenistic Greco-Roman sonship like that. You do have in the scrolls sonship ideology. We even have a Son of God text, but as you'll see, it's a symbolic sonship. It's never a real divine, copulation with a human woman like the Greek gods did, or an engendering in some mystical fashion of through the Holy Ghost of a child and a woman, as Islam tries to put it through Augustine, who came up with this idea that Jesus was the son of Mary. But, and as Muhammad puts it in the Quran, he doesn't have a father. He's the only human being after Adam produced by only a mother. And that comes from Augustine's presentation of Jesus as son of Mary, not son of Joseph or Mary. But the Gospels are confused on all that. They give genealogies for Joseph and everything, even though Joseph isn't supposed to be the father. So it's very confused. The Gospels themselves don't have any particularly ironed out ideology yet on these matters. But the point is that Adam is the first son of God, since he didn't even have a mother. He didn't have a mother or a father. Jesus, for Islam, only has a mother. But anyway, these are all attempts by theologians to rationalize certain presentations. But the point is, in Palestine, these never were the expectation. The scrolls have an idea of sonship, but it's always symbolic sonship. In other words, as I think there are two books. One proverb says, "The righteous one is the pillar of the world." And then in the wisdom book, which is an apocryphal book, it talks about all the righteous ones are sons of God. And I think that's basically the ideology of the scrolls towards sonship. It has to do with the righteousness ideology, which, if you recall, has to do with the Zadokite ideology, because what's the root of righteousness in Hebrew? ZDK, remember I told you? Zedek, Zadok, Sadducee, Zadik, righteous one. So the righteousness is to some extent involved in the sons of Zadok too. Because sons of Zadok can be sons of the Zadik, the righteous one, or sons of Zedek, of righteousness. I think in the New Testament once or twice it speaks about sons of righteousness, or at least it speaks about sons of the resurrection. Gospel of John speaks about sons of the resurrection. Children, if you prefer, whatever. These are always masculine in the grammar of the time. But you can say children of God or sons of God. So anyway, as I'm trying to explain, the problem is that I think the Essenes were, to some extent, what, quote, Christians were in Palestine. And that the Christ ideology that becomes defined by the word Christian is a later ideology. So what are we going to call these people? You see, it's hard to speak about Christians in Palestine because there was no Christianity yet in Palestine, therefore there's no Christ as such in the scroll. There is a Messiah. There are Messiah ideologies and things. So that's the problem, and Millick put his finger on it, but he couldn't go further than where he went. In any event, these people realized the importance of these documents, and so Sukenik University bought some, and Mar Athanasius bought some. After the Israeli-Arab War of 48, he left Palestine because things were in such an unsettled state, and he ended up in a Syriac church in Hoboken, New Jersey. And he brought a metal trunk with him of the scrolls that he had bought. And his church in Hoboken, Frank Sinatra's hometown, ran into some economic difficulties, so he pulled these scrolls out from under his bed one day and advertised them in the Wall Street Journal in the early 1950s, scrolls for sale. And the Israeli representative in New York happened to be the son of this Sukenik fellow, Yadid, who was now the Israel consul or representative in New York. He saw the thing and he got third parties to buy the rest of these scrolls from Cave 1. So the Israeli government, over about a 5 or 10 year period, got a hold of all the scrolls from Cave 1. And they went into this museum of the book. And that's what people thought the Dead Sea Scrolls were. But the Israelis didn't try to make political capital out of them. They just put them in the museum, let everyone see them, and published them, and didn't try to make huge academic reputations. They just opened them up for everybody to see. And people thought that's all the Dead Sea Scrolls were. But they didn't know that there were 10 other caves. Yeah?
And weren't those non-sectarian, the from Cave 1?
Well, we'll get to that. So we're not making any judgment about how they were yet. Let me just tell the rest of the story of the caves. So what happened was, after the partition of Palestine with the peace accords in 48-49, the scroll area, Qumran, fell under the Jordanian, originally the Palestinian, but then the Jordanian government took over the Palestinian area, and you never saw any Palestinians complaining about that until the Israelis came. Then suddenly they wanted a Palestine state, but they never complained about the Jordanians being there up to the time of the Israelis. And then, of course, now Palestine nationalism is as important as Zionist nationalism. But the point is, these things grow in people's minds when they realize how useful they can be as a public relations tool and to cement the whole population into a given mindset. And then people like Yasser Arafat, people like that, who, bless his soul, seems to be in not a very good way in Paris at the moment, can make a personal fortune out of all these things. His wife lives in total splendor in Paris, and he's reputed to have millions of dollars salted away in Swiss bank accounts and things like that. It's very good to be the head of the Palestine Liberation Movement. Why have a state when you can just keep on blowing up people and keep yourself as the head of this great thing and become the iconoclastic leader of the whole Muslim world? You're constantly being featured. And then that's how they polarized the whole Middle East over 40 years. But in any case, when the Jordanians were in control of this area and defeated Palestine nationalism, which never existed, nobody made any fuss about it at all, and nobody was worried about it or concerned about it. It's only when the Israelis came that this became a cause celebre.
Anyway, that's another story. What I'm trying to say is that in 49, the Jordanians took over and nobody complained. And then the Jordanians set up this commission called the International Team. So they didn't really care about the scrolls. They were Hebrew, and as some people have said, they gave some evidence that the Jews may have had some right to be there, actually, and that they didn't really want to get involved in that either. So since the church people were very interested in them, they gave it all over to Father DeVoe, who used his diplomatic and high-level connections, the position he was in, to become the head of the international team, and he chose all of the people who were on it. This all developed in the 50s, early 50s, after the partition of Palestine. So DeVoe became, even though he wasn't trained as an archaeologist, he was trained as a sociologist, vagally give his whole background. He started organizing archaeological expeditions to the Dead Sea in the early 50s. I think he had 3 or 4 seasons out there. And he started mapping the area. So it took them 4 years even to get out to where the scrolls were found. And so in his mapping, people at that time didn't do the work themselves. He had money, so he paid Bedouin to do it. And you see the pictures of all the French archaeologists, priests are out there in little tents, drinking their coffee or tea or whatever, and really doing very little else and paying all these Arab people to go and do all this stuff for them. Well, somehow DeVoe missed Cave 4 in his surveys. That, or his Arab teams, quote, missed Cave 4 in his surveys. And it was one of my students who pointed out to me, because he did one of the ones that went out on the expeditions with me. His name was Dennis Walker. He made it into Time magazine a couple of years ago when he represented me out there, and we found the mausoleum of the so-called righteous teacher, and he was the one who found that. And he gave up Dead Sea Scroll things. He's now delivering FedEx delivery man, but he was doing extremely well. And he showed me that because he did some research for me. He called my attention to the fact that 6 months after DeVoe missed this Cave 4, the Bedouins, so-called, discovered it and cleaned it all out. And I don't really believe that he could have missed it, or at least the Bedouins didn't tell him about it, one or the two, because it's within eyeshot of where the excavations on the Qumran Plateau are. And in your book, I don't know if you can see it. So I don't know what the true story of the discovery of Cave 4 is. That's where people have suspicions that things happen that may not have been totally. There's Cave 4 here. It's on the wadi here. And you can see the openings in it from, this is taken from where the ruins are here. And you just look across this little ravine, and there's Cave 4. So you mean to say no one walked down into there while he was doing years of excavations there? I mean, that's just almost impossible to imagine. Of course, if you never went out from your tent and your tea ceremony, maybe you could. Maybe that could happen. Well, I don't know the whole story, but the point is 6 months after he missed it, the Bedouins found it all. And whether they found it, I'm sure they'd already found it, but they weren't either telling him or they didn't want to know. But then DeVoe did another funny thing. Since he was controlling everything, he paid people, they claimed, to stop a black market, to bring up the material to Jerusalem that they had found, pilfered from caves, by the square centimeter. So that's how they paid them. They had a set price to avoid black market, they claimed. Whether that was true or not, the point was that the Bedouins worked in teams and they had to pay off all their people. So if they found a big manuscript, they just rip them up and give each person. And I think that accounted for some of the, not all of it, but some degree of the destruction of the materials in Cave 4. The fact that it was all ripped up in little pieces. Now, some of it may have been little pieces, a lot of it probably was, but a lot of it was probably divided up in work parties because of the École Biblique policy of paying by the square centimeter. And it all may be innocent. In fact, it probably was, but as I tried to say at the beginning, it's all totally mindless stupidity. Well, in any case, he went out there and did some excavations, and he became known for the archaeologist of Qumran, and he's written a book called The Archaeology of Qumran, or the Dead Sea Scrolls and Archaeology, I think it's called. Cave 2, they found in their surveys, there was not much in there. But a third cave, Cave 3, was where this famous thing that was
2 rolled pieces of copper called the copper scroll was found. Just sitting on top of the ground in this cave 3. They did find that. And for a long time they refused to open it. Then some clever American scholar read through the something that had been, like we said in the Maccabee books, banged out on copper. Read through the back of it, could say what it was, and it was a treasure. You could see it was a treasure. So they cut it open in Manchester. That's where Allegro worked. John Allegro, who became famous with some of his books on the Dead Sea Scrolls. He was the heretic among them. He had been sent from England to be part of the international team. And he described in his book his frustration because DeVoe and Millick would not let him mention the copper scroll and what was in it in his work that he published called The Dead Sea Scrolls in 1956, I think, because Millick hadn't published it yet. And that's where all this monopoly stuff got started, and then he said some things on English radio and TV, occasionally covered this, that upset DeVoe about relations to Christian origins. So they tried to get him off the team. In the meantime, he was trying to undermine them with his relations with the Jordanian monarch. And he said he could have had it all out with the Jordanian king in 1965 or so if he hadn't been thrown off the team and if the Israelis hadn't come. The Israelis came in 67, or I don't remember what the date he said he could have had it all out. But the point was they didn't know all this infighting, and they didn't want trouble with the Roman Catholic authorities or the Vatican either. So they left everything in control of the team that Father DeVoe and the Jordanian government had put there in the first place and didn't interfere with the setup. So the thing remained unpublished for another 20 years, all the documents that they had. So all of what we're talking about, the unpublished Dead Sea Scrolls are from Cave 4 and some other things from some of the other caves, not very much. And there's a massive stuff that was unpublished, and that's what we broke the monopoly with in 1989 here, because I got the pictures of all those things and we published them all. Through, unfortunately, the Biblical Archaeology Society in Herschel Shanks, and I told you the story of that. But the point was that from the time they stopped John Allegro from talking about the copper scroll until we broke the monopoly, there was a curtain of silence pulled down on this material. And that's what made people suspicious. A friend of mine from Germany who actually did the work for them on many of the manuscripts, he was a German scholar who they invited along, not just Millick. He said, after there was a famous book written in the New Yorker magazine by this left-wing American intellectual called Wilson. What was his first name? I can't remember his first name. Anyway, he'd written about Lenin and Trotsky, Finland Station, and he was a known fellow traveler of the, left-wing parties back in the 20s and 30s. Edmund Wilson, his name was. And he wrote this, he got interested in the scrolls, and he wrote this thing for the New Yorker magazine in 1955, where he suggested the scrolls had a lot to do with Christian origins. And that frightened the people at the École and in the international team so much that according to this German scholar who was with them, they said, let's go slow until the crazies go away. He quoted that to me. And basically a curtain of silence, a go slow process developed because of the fear of people saying things about Christianity that may or may not have been true in the eyes of the people who controlled these texts. And so this went on for 30 more years. And what happened was scholars lived and died and didn't get it all out and passed their manuscripts on to the next person, and then you could make an instant scholarly superstar just by giving them an unpublished manuscript and letting them publish it. And the monopolies just continued. And I wrote all about that in the Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered, how control of the unpublished manuscripts meant control of the field. Harvard had control of a certain amount of text because of Cross's position. Mostly biblical texts, not sectarian texts, which are the interesting ones. Millick and DeVoe kept all the sectarian texts, meaning all the new texts no one had ever seen before, under their strict control, and only gave it out to people they considered trustworthy. That is, people had the same view of the scrolls that they had.
So I said in my work that control of the unpublished manuscripts meant control of the field. Meaning if you give a young scholar, if you want to study scrolls in America, you'd have to go to Harvard. Now I didn't go to Harvard, so I was free of their ideological orientation. But that they didn't know that I was a scroll scholar. If you wanted a good position as I came to Cal State, nowhere Bill, basically, in their view. They've never heard of this place, and we're just religious studies. We're not scroll department or something like that. If you want to be a scroll scholar, you'd have to go to their program and then they would decide if you'd get a job somewhere. They would recommend you. So if one of their students was given this text called this mystical text called the Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice, and her name was Carol Newsom. And then she published this. She became an instant superstar in the field because they gave her a text. And she went to Emory University, got this very fine job there, and that's the way the field went. Then they would control the journals. They would control the reviews of all books. If you didn't toe their line, your books would be criticized, or you would be called a crazy or a lunatic, that I've been called many times by these people, and so on and so forth. So this is how they controlled the field, and it was like a curia almost, an ideological curia, but it was in an academic secular world. So to my mind, breaking, and they really resented mine, mostly mine, but some other people's efforts together, breaking the monopoly. They really went after us. So if you've heard bad things about me, it's because I wrote the monopoly and they wanted to come after me. And that's where the lawsuits developed in Israel too. So why Israel? Oh, because the Israelis, because of the big fuss over the scrolls, realized suddenly the scrolls were important. They hadn't bothered with the scrolls for 20 years and left them in the control of these other people. Then they saw all the world fuss that was made about the scrolls because of the agitation and movement that we began. And they realized, oh, they were just getting in on it. So they put one of their own editors in charge of it when this individual Scobell was found to be a drunkard and an anti-Semite. And they removed him from the head of the thing and put one of their scholars. And just at that time, we opened the whole thing up and published all of the scrolls. So they were really furious because they wanted to make their academic reputations out of the scrolls. They did anyway, but they still couldn't stomach the fact that we had undercut them as far as they could see it by publishing all these materials. So all these people had their axes to grind, and they did come after you. So if you've ever seen my name taken in vain anywhere or anything like that, you'll understand why. Maybe it's legitimate, but you've seen the kind of work we've done in this class, and you can judge if I know anything about what I'm talking about. And so we'll leave it at that tonight. See you next time. Remind me where we left off.